All right, so now let's verify our solutions and verify our graph using our graphing calculator. So again, I know I kind of sped through these 4 steps, but we're basically going to just do steps 4 and 5 in this video. We're going to verify what we found in the previous video to ensure that what we are graphing is actually what is on the sheet. So if we look at that first one, so first we're going to turn our calculator back on. So our first one is the x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0, right? So to graph, you just got to hit this y equals key. So just so we're clear, when you start graphing, like the graphing functions of the graphing calculator is all going to be in this row up here, right? This is where we're going to concentrate on this row when it comes to this graphing piece. All right, so the first thing we want to do is just press this y equals, and you should come to this screen. And so we want to type in x squared. Now the x is also a little tricky little button. You got to make sure you're pressing the right button. So our x key for the graphing calculator is going to be here, right? Do not use this. Okay, our x key is going to be right there. Okay, so we want to say x squared plus 4x plus 4x and then minus 12. All right, and so we can just graph this. Okay, and now you can see my screen, my computer, my window is not set up correctly right away. So this is a quick fix because we can just zoom this and we can just select option 6, which is our zoom standard. So all of these are just your zoom options: zoom in, zoom out, zoom decimal, zoom square, zoom. Like most of the time, we're just gonna press zoom standard because now that's gonna put us back to a min of -10 and a high of +10. So let me see why this graph is in here. So let me see if I don't have anything else in there. So now I just got to check something really quick. And that is, let me check my stat plots, make sure so this should be off. So if you're getting something looking like mine, right, you just got to make sure that your first 4 stat plots are off. So to get to your stat plots, you just press second y equal, right? And you just want to make sure that the first 4 is off and number 5 is on. And now when I go to graph this, okay, I get my parabola. And so I can't see my vertex right now. So if I really, like, we already know it, but if I wanted to visually see it on my graph, I'm gonna just press this Windows key and I'm going to go down to my y min, like what's my minimum value on my y, and just so I can see my vertex, I'm gonna type in -20, and then I'm gonna graph it again because I know that that's at -16, and now I can see that, right? But you still probably can't from the eye tell what these points are. So in order for you to see these points, you can just hit this trace button, right? And now you can see the function that is tracing and is automatically blinking on the y-intercept, okay? Also known as our vertical intercept, right? So sometimes the y-intercept refers to as the vertical intercept and the x-intercept refers to as the horizontal intercepts, right? And so to see your x-intercepts, you just need to go, just keep pressing the trace, right? And if it's not like spot on to what you're trying to find, there's a way we can do that, but I don't want to really get too tied up in all of this information. So, but you would press second calc, okay? And then you can find your intersecting by pressing intersect. But I'm gonna just show you a quicker way because again, you're gonna do all of this. Like once you get to this part of math, like you're in some type of calculus maybe where you're doing stuff like this. So I don't want to get too far off in the weeds with this, right? What I want to do is I just want to show you where you can find these points at. And that's, you can do that by just going into your table. So we're just going to press second graph. Okay. And now there's a couple of things in which we want to look for. We want to look for the values in which our y is 0. And so you see one right away at 2, 0, which is what we found in this first equation. That's one of our intercepts. And if you just keep going up to 6, you'll see the other intercept at -6, 0. Okay. One of the other things I want you to know, like, how can you recognize the vertex if you don't have these options on your calculator to zoom in and see that? Well, you know, your vertex is, again, where does the graph starts to reflect, and you know, when it go in one direction and change directions, and it's reflecting the same y values. So if you go up here to -2, -16, you see the y value start to reflect. At -3, it's -15. At -1 is -15. At -4 is -12. At 0 is -12. And at -5 is -7. At 1 is 7, right? So therefore, you know that -2, 16 is your vertex. Again, all of those we found by hand. All right. So again, if you wanted to see the graph, that is what it's looked like. You can also graph the original equation in two parts. Okay, so you can say x squared plus 4x, and you can say that that equals 12. Okay, and now for this graph, okay, you're going to see the intersects. So let me go to trace. Another thing with this trace function, right? Like if I go to that second graph, not to my y12, right there, right? So if I want to know, well, what is this point at 0? You can just type in the 0, like what's y when x is 0, and it's going to tell you it's going through the vertex at 0, 0. Okay. And then if you didn't know what this number was, you can say, okay, what is y when x is -4, and it's going to tell you that it's also 0. Okay, now what I'm trying to show you is that at this vertical line of 12 and this parabola, right? So now I need to go back into my window so that I can make my y max. Now I got to go up to at least 12 so we can see what's going on. Okay, now where this line is intersecting. Okay, so now let me trace, because now you're going to just see, and this is a much harder way to do this, but I just wanted you guys to see this. Okay, you can see now where these two lines intersect at, which is looking like +2. So I'm going to say, what is y when x is 2? And you see 12, right? Well, we know that 2 is our x-intercept when the equation, when this original equation is set to 0, right? Like I said, this is a little harder to see and know what's going on here. But then you can also, while in this trace function, say, okay, well, what is my y at when x is at -6, right? And so it should be 12 also, right? Because those are the intercepts for this actual parabola. So if you want to leave it in whatever form that is presented in the question, right, you can still find the intercepts for the graph by going to where the two lines intersect at. All right. So question 2, when we go to graph that, right, that this is a good reason why the first video we went over how to do this by hand, because remember there was a few fractions in question 2, right? So when we go to graph this 3x squared, which is already in set to 0, right, -11x -4, and we go to graph that. Okay, so when we go to our table to see what we just talked about last time, where we're looking for zeros in the y's, right? You're not seeing a lot of zeros, right? I see 1 0, so 4 0. Remember, that was one of the intercepts, and then remember our other intercept was a fraction, right? It was 1/3 0, which will be approximately up in between 0 and 1, right? But we're not seeing that value because you can't see the fractions, right? So you also notice you don't see the symmetry, like where's the change in direction, and now my numbers are matching up, negative with negative and positive with positive. Well, that's because we can't see the parabola, because remember that big old fraction the parabola, I mean the vertex was, right? So we can't see the vertex. So here's where, even though the technology is great to see, to get the visualization, right, the technology doesn't always solve these when it comes to fractions, right? So you have to still be able to understand how to do this by hand. All right, and so the last one I want to look at is that perfect square, which is just 4x squared -25. Okay, and then we're going to graph that. Okay. And again, this is meeting. So if I trace this, you're going to see that this is tracing, right? That's another fraction. Remember, it was positive 5.5, 0 and negative 5.5, 0 to find our intercepts. Okay. However, if you go to your table, you're going to be able to see the vertex. Okay. And you see our vertex is at 0, negative 25, because now you start to get the symmetry with your y axes. However, with your y values, however, you don't see the x intercepts, right? So again, that's where all of those different factoring techniques that you have learned through these first few weeks, this is where those come into play. Okay, so hopefully you got something out of this by looking at this and being able to graph using a calculator, because it can be very powerful as you're going through these and you're starting to learn how to solve this information. All right. But like always, if there's still something you're stuck on or not quite understanding, do not hesitate to reach out. Talk to you shortly.